The first thing you can kind of do to differentiate yourself is about the elements that are involved, like is the extent to which they can be controlled, and thirdly, whether elements are like a minor or a major aspect of the magic system. So let's talk about a few examples. I wanted to talk about the elements of the crown by K.L. Moody. Another example is Troubled Waters by Sharon Shin and the Alchemist, and one is The Never Tilting World. Here are a few tips on how you can find some inspiration if you're like you really want to write elemental magic, but you're not sure how to get started. Or welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my fantasy book genre deep dive. If you haven't seen the intro to the magic systems, you can just click on the info button and start there, or just look for the playlist. It's on my channel and just start from the video number 1. We have already discussed hard magic systems and soft magic systems, and today we are going to talk about elemental magic. Ooh, I'm really excited. And yeah, let's just get right into it. So elemental magic includes manipulation or the controlling of elements like fire, air, earth, or water. Just honestly, it's in the name what it is. It's magic about elements. So a positive side of using that magic system is that it's kind of easily understandable and really relatable. It's also visually appealing and allows for really dynamic like action scenes where you can do really cool combinations of how your characters use the element and do really cool scenes. A contra is that it can become repetitive and quite predictable, because it's often you have one element and you have the things it can do and the things it can't do. But honestly, I think that's only true if you don't really think about cool ways to go around that. And I don't know, like I always think about, for example, like Pokemon or something. They have all these species they're tied to, yet I don't know, it's not really boring to me. And like specifically to like the anime, they always manage to kind of blow my mind with just the way they handle it. So I think there is a lot, like I think it's pretty easy to avoid that if you just think of cool ways your magic works, and maybe you don't have to introduce everything to the readers from the beginning on, so it doesn't become too like repetitive. Another contrast that it might feel like cliched if it's not done with originality. Like we know the classic water, earth, fire, air, but honestly, like in my opinion, I think there's so many cool ways you can incorporate these in your story. And I think we often also forget that your story doesn't only consider of like the magic. Like there's also the story, there's the characters, there's the background, there's the atmosphere. And I think there are really cool unique ways to do elemental magic, even if you use just fire, which is like basic. But all the books that have kind of fire elemental magic still find their own ways to make it unique. And I will definitely also get into that later, how you can do that. And I found this blog post where the author also talked about this thing, what I just mentioned, that often the general thing is similar, but there are certain aspects you can do to differentiate the stories after all. So the first thing you can kind of do to differentiate yourself is about the elements that are involved, like what kind of elements you are choosing in your story. You can go in so many broad ways. It doesn't only have to go into like fire, earth, air, whatever. There are so many cool ways you can think of. For example, in Elemency from Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn, we already talked about that in other videos. He has characters that control different kinds of metals, and each person has like, or like each metal has like a unique power. So that's something really unique. Another way is the extent to which they can be controlled. For example, in Greek mythology, the gods' control over the elements is like quite limitless. For example, Zeus can control lightning, Poseidon the earth and the seas, and so on. But there are also other books where they only have like really specific abilities. So that's also something where you can differentiate yourself. Then thirdly, whether elements are like a minor or a major aspect of the magic system, whether you want it to be a big center of it or you just want to be in the background and kind of the atmosphere. For example, even in Harry Potter, we have this element, like for example, in the Order of the Phoenix, we have Voldemort fighting with fire and Dumbledore with water, which is, they control these, but it's not like a major part. But yeah, so you can see how you can kind of incorporate that in your story and decide how big of a role they are going to play. Then number 4, how the characters acquire the ability to control the fire. Is it intuitive? Is it learned? Is it trained? Or are they hand selected? Or yeah, there are so many different ways you can go about this, and with each of these steps you can add your unique twists to it. So I think it's really cool. And these were kind of the things the author said in her article. I think there's also another way to differentiate it by finding a deeper meaning behind your elements. For example, like what does water represent in your story? In Avatar, for example, I know it's not an anime, it's like a combination of like the Western cartoon thing and like Japanese anime, but in that series, fire is usually depicted as something really destructive, and Zuko, the character, uses it more out of anger. And then later he kind of learns how he can also use it in a different way. And I don't want to spoil it. I mean, if you haven't watched it, stop the video and watch it and then come back. Or finish this first and then watch it because it's good. And he kind of learns that there's another way of controlling it. So I think there's a really cool kind of area where you can be unique and add your own different meanings to what the elements mean and what they maybe mean to the character or what they mean in that world, and you can kind of do your own thing. Like I think usually like, okay, water is like for the clear-minded people, fire is like destructive, but maybe you could switch it up in your story. And lastly, how the magic is used and what its limitations are, and also how the elements in your world interact with each other. Like, can one extinguish the other, or does one have a disadvantage compared to another element? And I think this is also like the main way you can differentiate yourself. Like, how is the magic actually used? Is it used through fighting, like martial arts, or is it through emotions? And do they, for example, need water to be there if they want to use water magic? There's a lot of ways you can describe how the magic is used and what its limitations are, and I think this is one of the main parts where you can differentiate your books from others. So let's talk about a few examples. I wanted to talk about The Elements of the Crown by K.L. Moody. So what's the book about? Firstly, it's about a divided empire where Talise, a girl from like a dangerous outer ring, tries to escape this harsh life by mastering elemental magic at an elite academy, and she must become kind of the most powerful student and prove her worth in this world that is really like filled with political intrigue and the magic. And the whole elemental magic part about this is that it's focused on the manipulation of like the classic elements, water, earth, fire, and air. And Talise, the main character, along with like other students, they have to kind of learn to control it and wield these elements in like various trials and tasks to kind of secure their place in the society. But as a twist, these elements are not just a source of power, but they also reflect kind of the individual's emotional and mental state, which really adds depth to their usage and is not like just a classic, oh, I can bend fire, but it's like tied to their like emotional and mental state. And readers really like praised this book because it had this well-structured elemental magic system, and they found it really engaging and really integral to the world building. And many like enjoyed how Thalisa's like the character's journey intertwined with her mastery of the elements, like how she combined training these elements with unique character development. And some noted that kind of the this academy setting is like really familiar, which is true, but honestly, I feel I've never gotten enough of the whole academy thing. Maybe it will happen one day. But like these unique challenges the author incorporated into the story of how they master these elements kept it like really fresh. So I think that also shows that even in like really like cliched settings, you can still make your own unique thing in there. And just to give you a few quotes so you can kind of get a better feeling on how other authors describe it. And honestly, just reading helps myself to understand maybe, okay, I'm drawing a little bit of inspiration there and a little bit there. So I can understand better on how to write it. So one quote is, "She raised her hand, calling the wind, and it obeyed. An invisible force bending the world to her will." End quote. Another one is, "Fire leaped from her palm, a mirror of her inner turmoil, untamed and ferocious." Another one is, "The earth beneath her feet trembled, as if recognizing her command, yielding only to the strength of her resolve." So we really have this combination of the emotional state or the mental state combined with the elemental magic, and I think that's a really cool way the author did that. Another example is Troubled Waters by Sharon Shin, and this really stood out to me when I looked for books to kind of show you here. And just to give you a short plot overview, it's about Zoe Ardelay, and she's chosen to become the king's fifth wife. Awful. Scandalous. And yeah, so she naturally escapes to the river shores where she discovers her like true heritage as a water prime. And her journey takes her back to the royal court where she must like use this newfound elemental powers to navigate through courtly intrigue and deception. And the whole elemental magic part is that this magic system is based on the control of elements, which is tied closely to astrological signs. And Zoe, as this water prime, she can manipulate water and its properties, and her powers grow as she learns more about her lineage. And the magic system in this book is really deeply connected to the characters' personalities, where their elements kind of influence their decisions and their fate. So again, we have like a twist to the classical just controlling of elements. And the readers really liked Troubled Waters for like the lyrical and the symbolic use of elemental magic, and Zoe's connection to the water was viewed as more than just like a magical ability, but it really symbolized her emotional journey and personal growth. Some found the emphasis on the astrological sign like a little bit overdone, but overall the elemental magic was perceived as a well-crafted part of the world. And again, like with the other books, there might be some elements that seem overused, but again, you can add your twists to it. And I personally also enjoy kind of like familiar things, as long as it's not everything is like completely the same. So a few quotes from the books are, "The river whispered to her, its currents carrying secrets and stories from lands far beyond." Another one is, "Water flowed at her command, bending and reshaping itself as if it were an extension of her own will." Another one, "She felt the pull of the tides in her veins, an ancient rhythm that called her to power." Just so you have an idea on how you could possibly write this. So now that we heard a few examples, let's shortly go into what readers love and what they hate to read. What they really love is the visual appeal. It's easy to understand and you can create really, really cool visuals. Readers also love the versatility of it. So you have like a variety of elements that is happening in your story. If you're really creative, you can use them so diversely, and you can even choose like completely like different ones from the classic one. And this offers like a huge range of application and fighting scenes and just, I don't know, cool scenes on festival grounds where they use their magic. What they kind of dislike is overuse of tropes, like it can become cliched very easily, and personalities that are only like reduced to what the element is they belong to, and I definitely agree with that. What they want to see more of is like having unique twists, fresh takes, cool combinations, or people exploring lesser known elements. Definitely agree with that. So, how can you create one? I think one good way is to first think of the elements you kind of want in your story. Do you want one? Do you want two? Do you want more? Do you want maybe that the elements are changing throughout the character's development? Who can control them? Can you control all of the elements in your world, or can you only control one? Are you born with it? Do you choose it? Is there something that can maybe take it away or like weaken it? Do you need to learn certain techniques like martial arts, or do you need certain mental stability to be good at it? And also, how much effect, yeah, does your mental being have on it? Can your emotions kind of influence it or limit it? Or on the other hand, can the element control your emotions or has an effect on your emotions? Or is it a combination of both? And can, for example, stress or depression affect magic, or to like affect some of the magic? Another thing to think about is, can you just do it, or do you need like a medium to do it? For example, like a water source to do water magic, or a ring, an object, a person, a spirit, or something like that. Then you can also think about what limitations there are. I think this is a really important one, and like a really good one to add your own unique things to this. I think limitations can go from mental ones to physical ones to within the magic themselves, and think about the consequences and prices it has to use the magic, to maybe overuse it, to maybe use it wrong. And also, lastly, to how does the magic influence the characters? To what extent? Can they control that? Can they maybe completely like separate themselves from the magic? And I think these are really good questions to kind of get started. Maybe you can start with one and then kind of find certain conclusions from the answers you have to these questions, and then go like step by step. And yeah, here are a few tips on how you can find some inspiration if you're like you really want to write elemental magic but you're not sure how to get started, or you're having a little bit of trouble getting some inspiration. I think as a first tip, try to mix an element with like an unconventional force. So choose one base element, whether it's like fire or shadow or light or air or whatever, and then mix that with like something really unconventional. For example, memories or dreams or technology or breathing, smelling, physics laws, or I don't know, flowers or something. Like maybe even look around in your room or outside your window and think about something that you can connect magic to. Finally, try to link elemental magic to the world's history or its politics, so that there's like an intertwined state of the both. So, for example, you could tie like the origins of the elemental powers directly to like the rise or the fall of the ancient empires, or religious beliefs, or like environmental catastrophes. And then by showing how that changed the world's status, it makes the magic feel much more integral to the world and not just as a sole power source. For example, if air magic was once used by like an ancient race to build like floating cities, remnants of that culture could still linger and shape like modern politics. And it's then more about the characters living in that world and living with those struggles or advantages. And this can create a lot of depth that is really appreciated. Another thing you can do is think of a limitation or a price first. Like ask yourselves, what does each element take from its wielder, and then kind of like backtrack from what then the actual magic is like. And lastly, maybe think of elements that create a new one once they are mixed. So for example, if you have acquired like two elements, or you've trained two elements, you maybe get a whole new skill set if you combine those elements together and it creates like a new element or something. And maybe this could also even be tied to like social status, because people with higher social status have more access to resources and thus can learn more and also get more powerful because they can combine more elements. And I think this can also create really cool, and I think this can create really cool fighting scenes, especially because it creates more unpredictability, because maybe someone has found a new element the opponent hasn't really seen before or known before, and then they kind of have to, within this fight, find out how they can deal with that magic, or have to first recognize what its limitations or weaknesses are. And I think that like can be really, really cool. So before we come to an end, I want to give you two last recommendations of what you can read to understand elemental magic better. So one is The Alchemist and one is The Never Tilting World. So to get into The Alchemist just for a short second, in that world, there's no really exterior item that is required to channel energy like a wand in Harry Potter, but magic can be generated by itself without any external requirements, and every single person has kind of the potential to channel their own powers, which is reflected in their auras. And humans and human beings, for example, require training to be able to access these magical abilities. And the story revolves around Josh and Sophie, who, despite being like ordinary and human, possess like really strong, powerful singular auras that can be like channeled into these magical acts and feats. And I also read The Alchemist and I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's a really cool book to get into this whole elemental magic system. So, one quote from that is, Sophie shivered as she felt the magic call into her, spreading through her bones, muscles, and organs. It was a strange, tingling sensation, almost like an electrical current, and I left her feeling both exhilarated and terrified. So I think there you can also get a lot of inspiration on how to write it, or like how this author describes the magic. And lastly, The Never Tilting World by Rin Chupico, which is a fantasy novel that features a unique and intricate system of elemental magic. And the world in the novel is kind of divided into two realms, so one of eternal day and the other of endless night. And this division is due to a catastrophic event. And the magic system in the world plays a really, really crucial role in the story. So to give you a short overview, in the world, elemental magic is really central to the plot and the characters' abilities. The four primary elements are earth, water, fire, and air. And different characters have affinities or like powers related to these elements. So the main characters, including the twin goddesses Heidi and Odessa, they possess the ability to control these elements, but their mastery and the way they use these powers kind of varies. And the novel explores how these powers kind of influence the world around them and how the characters interact with their environment using these abilities. And the elemental magic in the novel is really tied to broader themes of balance and chaos. The imbalance caused by the catastrophic event is also mirrored in the imbalance in magic, and the character's journey involves kind of trying to restore this equilibrium to their powers and to the world itself. And as I also kind of like wondered what kind of book I wanted to choose to recommend here, I think this is a really cool book to get an introduction to elemental magic, but also with its like unique twists, and it sounds really exciting, so I really want to kind of read that book as well. And to give you a short understanding of how the author writes it, so you can see like if that's something you would like to get into. Quote, the earth was her canvas and her magic the paint. She reached out with her mind, feeling the rocks and soil respond to her call. It was like breathing, so natural that she could not tell where she ended and the earth began. Slowly, she coaxed the ground to rise to form the shelter that would protect them from the storm. End quote. Another quote is, Heidi felt the metal hum beneath her fingers, a familiar rhythm that matched the beating of her heart. She closed her eyes, imagining the shape she wanted to create, and with a thought, the metal bent and twisted, reshaping itself into the tool she needed. It was like molding clay, each curve responding to her will. End quote. Another quote is, the air crackled with energy as Odessa summoned the winds. She didn't command them, they were not hers to control. Instead, she invited them, asked for their aid, and the wind responded, swirling around her, lifting her and cloak, carrying her message across the plains. End quote. I really like the way the author describes elemental magic. I feel it's like it really immerses yourself into the story and how the characters also feel about magic themselves. And so yeah, these are kind of like my tips on what you can kind of read to get a little bit into understanding everything better. And I really hope this video also gave you like the first Kickstarter in understanding elemental magic and whether this is something you want to include in your story, whether it's just a minor part or like the main part of it. And so this is kind of everything I wanted to say about elemental magic. I think this is a really cool system and I really enjoy reading about it. I don't have anything more to add to this video. If you have like your own recommendations on elemental magic, please feel free to write them in the comments. I love reading good recommendations from you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And if you want to, because you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like or a comment. And if you don't want to miss out on any other videos in this genre deep dive or just in general from this channel, you can hit the subscribe button. And then see you next time. Love you. Bye bye. Why do I always get a voice cracked when I say bye? It's fucking pathetic.